Turkey's President Recep Tayyip Erdogan is at the White House for talks with US President Donald Trump. The two leaders are seen as having a good rapport, which Erdogan is hoping will help him land a key arms deal. Leading Republicans have indicated that the U.S. government's block on sales of advanced fighter jets to Ankara may soon be lifted. But Erdogan is less likely to move Trump on another issue dear to him, pressuring Israel to end its war in Gaza. We can now bring in our correspondent Dorian Jones, who joins us from Istanbul. Dorian, what are the main sticking points between Turkey and the U.S. going into this meeting?
Well, I think the key sticking points will be Israel's war on Gaza. That has been a major point of tension and difference between Ankara and Washington. But what we've been hearing from the initial comments between President Trump and Erdogan in the Oval Office is that Trump does appear to be receptive, saying that he acknowledges things have to be done. He said he will be meeting with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu on Monday. So there does appear to be at least some ground whereby a realization that Ankara's concerns have to be addressed along with the wider international community. Also, Turkey's close relationship with Russia is also a stumbling block. Turkey is a major importer of Russian energy, and President Trump raised that in front of Erdogan and the world media, saying that he called on Erdogan to end these purchases. Now, Turkey has gone some way already this week, signing a major multi-billion-dollar deal over 20 years to buy American liquefied natural gas. That could help to assuage some of Trump's concerns. And also there's a question of Syria. American forces have been working with Kurdish forces in Syria, which Ankara considers linked to Kurdish separatists in Turkey. That's been a major point that Erdogan's been calling for the end of that support as part of efforts to make the Kurdish forces in Syria merge with Damascus. That will also be on the agenda as well. So there are still major sticking points between the two leaders. But at the moment, the atmosphere seems very positive. President Trump paid tribute to Erdogan's influence in the region and reiterated his good relationship with the Turkish leader.
This is Erdogan's first visit to the White House since 2019. So from Ankara's perspective, are ties better with the U.S. under a President Donald Trump?
Oh, well, I think it's night and day compared to President Trump's predecessor, Joe Biden. President Biden refused to host Erdogan in Washington. That was unprecedented. Turkish leaders all the way back to the Second World War have been hosted in Washington. Biden refused to do that. He made little secret of his absolute dislike of Erdogan, and that feeling was pretty mutual. A deep freeze existed with Biden, but with Erdogan and Trump, it's a real bromance, as many people describe it. Both leaders have made it little secret that they have a good relationship, they respect one another. And in fact, the American ambassador to Turkey said that this meeting is all about Trump giving legitimacy to Erdogan. So that is seen as an indication that these two leaders do want to work together after the previous chill.
A bromance, you call it, with matching ties, no less. What do you think Erdogan is hoping to get out of this meeting?
Well, I think Erdogan does have a long shopping list. I think he will be looking for the ending of these restrictions on the sale of American weapons to Turkey. Top of the list is America's top-of-the-line F-35 stealth jet. Now, Turkey was part of the program to build that jet, but they were thrown out of that program after they bought Russian missiles, the S-400. Now, Erdogan is very insistent to be able to buy those planes. They've already paid $1 billion as a down payment, but they are facing a lot of opposition in Congress, who's the final say on that decision, especially with the Israeli and Greek lobbies lobbying very hard to avoid those sales of those jets to Turkey. So there is a major point of tension there. I think also Erdogan will be pressing on Trump to lift the final sanctions on Syria. Now, Trump earlier this year said he was lifting sanctions on Syria, but there's these very draconian Caesar sanctions. They are imposed by Congress. Now, Erdogan's pressing for the lifting of those. They see that as key to stabilizing Syria. But again, there is a lot of pressure in Congress. They want Damascus to make a security deal with Israel before any final sanctions are lifted. So that is another point of tension between them. And I think Erdogan will be looking for Trump to make some steps on the Israel-Gaza conflict, and also over fears that Israel possibly will annex the West Bank. Erdogan, I think, will be looking for a commitment from Trump to prevent Netanyahu from going that far forward. So I think that there's a long shopping list on both sides of the aisle, as it were.
DW's Dorian Jones in Istanbul. Thank you so much.
And for more analysis, we can talk now to Sinan Ülgen. He's the director of the Istanbul-based think tank Centre for Economics and Foreign Policy Studies, and he's a former Turkish diplomat. Very warm welcome to DW. We just heard there in that report, one of the most contentious topics between Trump and Erdogan today will be Gaza. Do you think we'll see open disagreement between the two leaders, or rather a show of unity for the cameras?
I don't see a show of unity, but the best that we can hope for is for the two leaders to agree to disagree. The reason why we want to see a show of unity is that the positions are so starkly different, and there's no real way to bridge those differences in relation to Israel and its behavior.
Erdogan is under pressure at home to do more for Gaza, yet he seems to be very happy to do business with a US president who, as we've been saying, openly backs Israel. So how much of a balancing act is this visit for the Turkish president?
It is, but there's no real heavy criticism in Turkey about doing business with the United States. And in that sense, there is no immense pressure on Erdogan to be very critical of the U.S. administration. There is definitely an acknowledgement that Turkey needs the U.S. On a number of other areas that pertain to Turkey's national interest. So everything cannot be subsumed to Israel and its policies.
President Trump has announced some pretty significant trade and military deals with Turkey. Can you talk to us about them, how significant they are?
Yes, Erdogan is going to be meeting Trump with a package of goods. On the one hand, there is going to be a commitment to buy a sizable number of Boeing civilian planes that should boost the long-term capacity of the national flag carrier, Turkish Airlines. And then the second stream will relate to military aircraft, where there's going to be, in all likelihood, an announcement that Turkey and the US agreed on a package of new F-16s to be delivered to Turkey. And then on top of that, there is going to be discussion about Turkey's return to the F-35 program, but that is still going to be conditional because Turkey remains under CAATSA sanctions, which is countering America's adversaries through Sanctions Act. But also there's still the S-400 problem that needs to be addressed for the return to the F-35 to be formalized.
US-Turkey relations were strained under the former US president, President Biden. As we've been saying, Donald Trump is known to have a good relationship with Erdogan. So do you see this as a fresh start that will continue strengthening the relationship between the two leaders?
Yes, absolutely. In the sense that, indeed, the relationship with the previous administration was very much marked by the obstacle that was created by the erosion of democratic standards in Turkey. But the Trump administration doesn't seem to be at all interested in this dynamic. But there's also a second factor, which is different than during at least the first part of the Biden administration, and that's the changing geopolitical context in Europe after the war in Ukraine, where having Turkey on board has become more important, not only for the United States, but also for Europe, I would argue.
How is Trump seen in Turkey in terms of his reliability? I mean, back in 2019, when Turkish forces entered northern Syria, Trump threatened to destroy the Turkish economy. So is he seen as a reliable partner in Turkey?
No, not at all. I don't think he's seen as a reliable partner anywhere else than the United States and the electorate that voted for him, I suppose. However, he is somebody who understands how to do transactional deals. That's how he's seen. And therefore, Turkey is strategizing based on this assessment of Trump's leadership approach.
Sinan Ülgen, director of the Istanbul-based think tank Centre for Economics and Foreign Policy Studies. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.